Alright, hello, my name is Evan and welcome to my fake volumetric lights tutorial. Let's get right into it. Right here I have a normal spotlight and in an exponential height fog, so we have a normal lumen volumetric light right here. If I unhide my mesh, here I have a mesh with a material that is our fake volumetric light, and I'll show you all the parameters that we have to make it look the same, if not better than this actual volumetric light over here. So first off, I have clouds that we can add into this, and this is nice. I think this gives it an edge over normal volumetric lights because you needed something like a light function for this, but now it's just built into this material on this static mesh. And I'll actually show the static mesh. Here you can see that this mesh is just a cone that's smooth shaded, and we took off the front. So back to our material, we're gonna open up all our parameters, and we have cloud amount. So cloud amount, I usually put at something like 0.2 to 0.4. 0.4, we can just see it more. And it just adds a noise texture, or actually subtracts a noise texture from our normal gradient. And when we click animated, then it just adds a panner that we can change with this cloud speed parameter. And then we have a nice little wind effect going there. With tiling, you can also change the size of the clouds to make them smaller or bigger. I usually just like somewhere around 1. Here for our fall off, we're using a radial gradient fall off, and I basically always have this one turned on, and I have it on inverse as well, just because I think it works better. And a radial gradient is basically a circle, so we can change the density like this, and again this is inverted, and we're just going to change the density and all these parameters to get a nice light effect, get a nice fade out. And so we want to make sure that the light is done before the end of the mesh over here. So we can do something like this, change the radius down a bit. That looks pretty good. And so comparing these two, the other thing we're still missing is this has kind of a fade in from the edges, and ours really has sharp lines right here. And the way that we'll get rid of that is with a Fresnel effect. So we add in Fresnel right there, and that's going to cut out a good amount of our light, so we can add some more back in like this, but not too much. And now you can see we have more of a fade in from the sides, which is thanks to our nice Fresnel effect. The other nice thing about Fresnel is that we can look at it from the front more easily. If we do it like this, it's way too bright, too much, but with Fresnel on, you can look at the lights from any angle and it still looks pretty good. Other parameters we have, of course, emissive strength. When you set this high in lumen, it's nice because it actually illuminates the scene and basically does the job of a light as well. And then we have a base opacity, so if you want all parts of the mesh to be a certain amount of opacity, you can bump this up and it will just give everything like 0.4, but I usually keep this at 0. And the max opacity, of course, clamps the max opacity. And now that we got this looking good, I'll show some of my use cases and then we'll just get into the nodes. So here's one, lighthouse. I really like how this looks. I've used this in some games before. And if you really crank up the emissive, it also casts some light on the objects around it, which is super nice. And then we got car headlights over here. I think this is another great use of these volumetric lights. That's way cheaper than putting spotlights. Like if you have a bunch of cars or traffic that you need to do, this is a great way to do it without putting 2 lights on every single car. You just add some meshes in this nice shader. So this is the dithered one. I like how it looks from all angles. And here's the translucent one. Translucent one's going to be more expensive, but it doesn't have this dither effect, which some people don't like. I actually don't mind it at all. I feel like for things like mist and steam, it works pretty well. But you can use this translucent version if you want to. All you got to do is change the blend mode of the material from mask to translucent. And we have back here, we have the car lights. And the nice thing is that the way that we get these different colors is we don't have to make different material instance for each color, because I have primitive data defaults for some parameters like hue and emissive strength. So we can change the hue on a per mesh basis, which is super nice. You don't have to make all these material instances. You can just change it per mesh. The other thing we can change is the emissive strength, which is really nice too. Some other examples, stoplight. I think this looks really good, especially if you have them turn on and off with all the lights here. Adds a really good effect, really good ambiance. And here's like a sign that we have that has a nice subtle effect of light coming off of it. And in this example, I think I like the translucent one better. But the other great thing about all these that I'm showcasing is that they look the exact same basically when you're on low settings. So this effect is good, it's performant, it imitates the actual volumetric lights pretty well, and it looks the same across all quality platforms, which is super nice. Alright, so now let's get into the nodes and how you can actually make this yourself. So again, we have blend mode is masked, shading model unlit, and we have it two-sided. You can either have it two-sided or you can add extra geometry so that you have normals on both sides, but I just prefer to do two-sided. Let's get into the emissive color first because this is the least complicated. This overall, the shader isn't too complicated. It is a lot of nodes though, but we'll get into it and you'll see it's not that scary at all. So up here, I was trying to use texture as emissive so we could bring in like a color texture. I had bad luck with that. If anyone else can figure it out, please let me know in the comments and I'll update this video. But anyways, let's just get into the color. So we have a color parameter multiplied by our hue parameter, which is a primitive data. If you don't know how to make primitive data parameters, hold 4 and click, and then you have a vector 4. You can convert to a parameter. Now you have a vector 4 parameter, and you can go in here and click use custom primitive data, turn it on, and then you set the indexes that you need that data to be, and then you can change it on a per mesh basis. So right here, hue is 0, 1, 2, 3, and then I have an emissive strength one as well that is 4, 5, 6, 7. Make sure they don't overlap or you'll have some problems. And so color and hue lerp together with the alpha being alpha of hue, and this is really nice because it means if you don't change the primitive data on the mesh, the alpha will start at 0, which means it will never get mixed in unless you actually change this value. Same with the emissive strength, we add 1 plus the emissive strength so that if this is just set to 0, which is the default value, it will just multiply by 1. So we have color and hue lerp together, multiplied by our emissive strength parameter, and then multiplied by our emissive strength primitive parameter. And that's all it is for the emissive color, pretty easy. Now for the opacity mask, we have some more going on. Let's look at our panner. This is for the clouds, so we just have a world position that's divided. We have our tiling parameter right here, and we have a panner block right here. And so we just plug time in there, plug our speed parameter in. This is a vector 3 parameter. And then we plug in our coordinates at the top. And then we have a switch parameter that lets us decide if we want it to pan or not. So false right here is without the panner and true is just with the panner. Then we put that into the UVs for our clouds texture, which is just a channel packed cloud texture. If you want these textures, I give out my project file on Patreon, so you can subscribe to me there. That is super helpful and helps me make more of these tutorials. Anyways, then we multiply by our cloud amount parameter. Pretty simple right there. And then we subtract this from, if we go back here, we have our fall off from center / radial gradient mask right here. So what is that? Let's go, we take the object pivot point, we break it out, and then we have an offset for each component of that float 3. So we have offset X, Y, and Z. This just lets you change where the fall off is in world space. Really nice to have, and it helps you use these lights in any use case. Then we put that float 3 back together, mask it to get a vector 2, so we can put it into the center position of this radial gradient exponential. If you don't know what this is basically a circle mask, and it takes a center position, a radius, density, invert density, and UVs, and it just makes a circle mask for us to use. So what we use it for is we take all our offsets, we figure out where we're putting this circle mask, and we figure out what the radius of the circle mask is, what the density is, and I have it on default inverse because I just thought it looked better that way. You can change this if you want. But then we take this, and this is now our overall mask, and so then we subtract the clouds from that. And then we have a switch right here, so if you don't want this radial gradient, you can just turn this false, and it will just take the clouds through here. And then we have another switch for Fresnel. So Fresnel is what took off the edges of the opacity and made it look nice and smooth for us. And if you don't know what Fresnel is, it basically takes into account your camera angle and the normals of the mesh that you're looking at and gives you a mask based on that. And so we use that to just smooth out the edges of our cone mesh that we're using to fake this light. And the parameters here is the Fresnel exponent and the Fresnel fraction, which you can just mess with these to get the desired result. And the last couple of parameters that we use right here is base opacity. We add that to everything so that we just have a base amount if you need this. And then we clamp everything between 0 and our max opacity, which is pretty simple. And then the last node is dither temporal AA. That's what gives us this nice noisy effect and makes it kind of a fake translucency. And just like that, you have fake volumetric lights. I'll go through one more time. It's all slow, so you can pause the video and copy these nodes if you want. And that's about it though. Let me know in the comments what you use this for and what you'd like me to do the next tutorial on.